All right, I can't really hear the people in the room, but it sounds like maybe we're ready to go.
Yes, we are ready for you. I'm muting so we don't get feedback.
Okay, all right, muted. Okay, and I'm assuming that we can see my screen. So please let me know if you can't, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So, all right, welcome to everyone who's just joining, and thanks to those of you who really enjoyed Cheryl's talk just before mine and decided to stay and hear more about our research. Um, So hello, I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm Brittany Ewing. I'm a biologist with the United States Geological Survey Western Ecological Research Center. And I'll be sharing our research in which we found that incorporating multiple turnarounds into barrier fencing can increase the probability that migrating salamanders reach a passage system, which we studied in Stanford, California. And I want to highlight my co-authors, of course, Cheryl Brehme with USGS, Michael Hobbs of Hobbs Ecology, Esther Adelsheim with Stanford University, and Robert Fisher, also with USGS, my PI. And we are grateful to the Caltrans Division of Research, Innovation, and System Information for funding this research. Okay, so you should all well know by now that roads are a primary source of habitat fragmentation and mortality for many wildlife species. And my co-author, Cheryl Brehme, has already presented a very thorough overview of our research studies in this field to address information gaps in regards to barrier fencing, permeability of crossing structures, and more. And we focus primarily on highly susceptible migratory amphibians that make seasonal movements among upland habitat and breeding habitat. So in particular, two areas of study led to the research question at hand. Give up distances along fencing for migratory species, and effectiveness of turnarounds at fence ends, which led us to investigate the effectiveness of multiple turnarounds. So you've seen this figure before. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but specifically, we had previously studied fence give-up distances for two migratory amphibian species, the Yosemite toad and California tiger salamander. And we used specialized Hobbs active light trigger passive camera monitoring techniques. And our research has shown that these amphibians move back and forth an average of 40 meters along fencing before giving up and going back into the habitat if they couldn't find a passage. So 40 meters is the average. And if we wanted 90% of migrating individuals to reach the passage, then we're looking at a passage spacing of 12 to 20 meters. Success at reaching a passage also greatly depended on the direction the animal turned upon reaching the barrier fence, so whether they were moving toward or away from the passage. And this figure depicts that if the probability that an animal reaches a passage is much greater if they initially make the correct direction choice, which is towards the passage. And if they make the wrong choice and they're moving away, they have a very low probability. Another study we did, again, you've seen this figure before, it was on the effectiveness of turnarounds at fence ends. So on the left is a depiction of a turnaround. Animals, let's see if I can get my pointer working. Laser pointer. Animals go into the turnaround, they follow along the fence, and then they come back out and their trajectory has changed, and now they should be heading back towards the passage entrance. These are a common addition to barrier fencing systems, and as far as we know, our group was the first to study whether these were actually effective in changing the trajectory of animal movement. And again, this is a rehash of what Cheryl presented, but we found that they really worked, and they were very effective, especially for amphibians, with over 80% moving back along the fence line after encountering a turnaround. Prior to the study I'm presenting now, the multiple turnaround study, we had been monitoring the movements of migratory California tiger salamanders, which I will refer to as CTS at several points throughout the presentation. And our study site was at Stanford in California. So this is a map of the study site. We've got the barrier and tunnel study system. The top is Lagunita, which the salamanders make seasonal movements to for breeding. And the bottom is the upland habitat where they spend the rest of their time. So these red lines in the center of the graphic indicate three-tunnel system. And on either side, we can see 150 meters of barrier fencing extending out. And these little squares indicate where our camera stations were installed. About every 25 meters, so 0, 25, 50, 75, 100, 125 meters away from the passage entrance, so we could capture animal movements. There are also turnaround structures at the fence ends only. So you can see those kind of curved structures on either end. And, we did document several animals using those turnaround structures, but I wanted to highlight one particular animal that showed us just how effective these turnarounds could be. And I'm going to show a video of that animal's journey now. Hopefully it'll work. So this animal's moving the wrong direction. All right, moving back in the correct direction towards the passage entrance. All right, thank you for bearing with me through that. Round of applause for our determined salamander going the distance. But I do want to point out that was an outlier. Remember, the average fence movement distance is only 40 meters before most animals would give up. But that got us thinking, instead of a CTS having to move all the way to the fence end to encounter a turnaround, what if there were multiple turnarounds spaced along the fence that could redirect animals moving the wrong way earlier, so they could potentially have a greater chance at finding a passage? Would multiple turnarounds facilitate greater passage permeability? So we conducted the multiple turnaround study, and we went back to Stanford, building on the 3 previous seasons where we studied their movements and give up distances. And what we did is we added small turnarounds along the existing fence at the existing camera stations. So those turnaround structures were about 1.5 meters long, 0.5 meter wide. And again, they were spaced at the existing camera stations, so every 25 meters. And we added an additional turnaround at 12.5 meters from the passage system entrance. If you'll remember, that's the recommended passage spacing. So this is what the study site looked like. Let's see. In image A, the shaded area kind of towards the top of the image, this is where the passage entrance is. Over here on the left side is the turnaround. And the idea is that if an animal was moving from the shaded area towards this turnaround structure, they would travel along the fence, enter into the turnaround, follow along this fence, and then be redirected in the correct direction back towards the passage entrance. You can also see that with this design, animals that were already headed in the correct direction would still be able to continue straight along towards the passage entrance. Image B shows the halt camera with the threshold at the bottom. And image C shows another halt, which was mounted to fit inside the 3 tunnels. So the type of image that we were getting from these systems were providing a dorsal view of the salamander, where we can clearly see unique spot patterns. And we can also see the labeled threshold, which is showing the distance from the passage entrance. And the arrows indicating the direction towards the passage entrance. At the upper right, we have a T, an upside down T, indicating that this is the turnaround. And at the bottom right, we also got a timestamp. So we ended up with a lot of images, over 170,000 photos, 6,700 of which contain CTS, with the help of I3S software, looking at the timestamps, measuring the snout vent length, and human validation. We were able to analyze the images and map movement paths for individual salamanders. So putting it all together, here are the distributions of fence movement distances from all 5 seasons. And the bottom 2 were after multiple turnarounds were installed. So they're separated into whether animals did not reach the passage over on the left, and if they did, which is over on the right. And seasonal rainfall totals are shown in blue. And you can see it was variable for both systems. After the installation of the the turnarounds, the average fence give-up distances ranged from 25 to 45 meters for those that never reached the passage system, and they had fairly similar distribution curves. And this represented how far the animals were documented moving along the fence line before giving up. For those that did reach the passage system, we predicted fence movement distances to average lower, as the animals would not have to move very far before reaching the passage. But interestingly, we found the opposite. The distribution after the installation of the multiple turnarounds changed substantially, with a larger proportion of those animals that reached the passages moving farther distances. All right, here's some fun stats from the turnarounds. For animals that were initially moving toward the passage, 32% of those animals interacted with the turnaround, averaging 4.1 interactions. For those animals that were moving away from the passage, 95% interacted with the turnaround, averaging 3.3 interactions. So upon exiting the turnarounds, 74% of the animals actually started moving in the correct direction towards the passage entrance. 12% moved back into the turnaround, at which point they may have chosen to exit in the correct direction. And 12% moved away from the passage, so the wrong way. And animals spent an average of about 6 minutes in the turnarounds. All right, how about the probability of animals actually reaching the passage system? Prior to the installation of multiple turnarounds, for animals that were going in the correct direction towards the passage entrance, the probability that CTS would reach the passage is associated with their initial distance from the fence. So the closer they are, the better chance they have of actually making it there. Where animals were moving away from the fence, they have a very low probability regardless of distance. Now with multiple turnarounds, look at this. Now that the CTS had an opportunity to turn around sooner, animals that were initially moving away have a near equal probability of finding the passage system, which is really encouraging. So some effects of the turnarounds. Before the turnarounds, we only had about 14 to 33% of the CTS that reached the passage system, and they moved an average of 40 to 42 meters. After the installation of multiple turnarounds along the fence, we now have 56 to 71% of those CTS reaching the passage system, moving an average of 47 to 58 meters. And upon reaching the passage system, 71 to 100% were detected inside the passage, and 89 to 100% made it all the way through. So it's really critical that these animals find the entrance. And let's see if I can show a couple examples. I'm going to kind of blow through these, but this is an example of an animal that was initially moving away at 50 meters. So you can see he's about to enter the turnaround. Comes back out about 2 minutes later. So moving from 50 to 25, 12.5, 0 meters, and successfully entering the tunnel. All right, here's another example of an animal that is actually quite close, 12.5 meters away from the entrance, but headed in the wrong direction. So this animal is headed into the turnaround. Again, about 2 to 3 minutes later, he comes back out and moving in the correct direction towards the passage entrance. So 12.5 meters, passing over the 0 meter, and into the tunnel. And finally, an animal that is moving in the correct direction, but is really far away. So 125 meters away from the passage entrance. So this animal is making good progress, moving at 100 meters, 75 meters, 50 meters, and oh, something happened between 50 meters and 25 meters where this animal decided to turn around. Didn't enter a turnaround structure, just moved back along the fence. So you can see it enters the turnaround, comes back out 3 minutes later, headed in the correct direction towards the passage entrance, 25 meters, 12.5 meters, 0 meters, and finally into the tunnel. So total success for these animals at reaching the passage system increased from 5 to 66% for CTS that were initially moving away from the passage. There was no significant effect on success for CTS moving toward the passage. Turnaround interactions did slow the speed of CTS moving along the fence line due to time within the turnarounds. But the big takeaway is that there's a potential for increasing permeability of existing passage systems for amphibians and reptiles. Now, as mentioned at the beginning of the talk, the optimal solution is closer spacing of passages, but incorporating multiple turnarounds into permanent designs can facilitate animals reaching a passage entrance. But in some cases of already existing passages, like the one at Stanford, adding turnarounds can increase permeability to migrating salamanders. So I did want to thank so many people. Alan Launer at Stanford University, of course, Caltrans and DrySI for their support, Hobbs Ecology for the camera systems, USGS, my colleagues, Devin Adzett-Morris, Wendy Bear, Tristan Garian, Jennifer Kingston, Trisha Matsuda, Cynthia Hitchcock, and Carlton Rochester. Could not have done this research without them. And thank you all for listening to this presentation, for sticking around. If you wanted to learn more about our road ecology research, our programs, go ahead and take a picture, screenshot. On the upper right is a QR code that will lead to the USGS reptile and amphibian road ecology webpage that has a lot of our research up there. You can find reports. If for some reason this website is no longer available in the near future, you can access this particular research through the Caltrans report by scanning the QR code that's towards the center of the screen. And I'll be happy to take any questions now. Thank you.
I know you couldn't hear that, Brittany, but everyone just clapped for you, just so you know. It wasn't.
Oh, thank you. I saw it.
So if you have any questions, please feel free. I'll just repeat them up here. It is 5:05. We've technically ended, so you're also welcome to leave. Brittany's email is on screen, so you can always email her later. So let me know. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, what is the most likely application for this? Is it more of a cost saving measure, or is it more for implementation for existing crossing structures?
I think really we're just learning from, oh, sorry, can everyone hear me? Okay, I see the room is muted again. We're really just learning about the efficacy of these types of mitigation measures. And really ideally is they could be incorporated into permanent design structures, so future structures, in cases where putting multiple passages close together is not an option. But, you know, just like this case at Stanford, I think the passages were installed in 2003, already existing, and they just wanted to try to find a way to increase permeability. This was a good solution. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, do we have any other questions?
And if anybody has further questions, Cheryl Brehme is in the room, and I'm sure she would love to talk to you about this research.
All right, thank you so much, Brittany.